favorite parts of being the founder of Sembrar is I get to interact with so many different people, so many different perspectives, from founders to large companies, product leaders in all different spaces. And this is a great chance to bring their voices out, to give their perspective and their experience. So really excited to be here with you as our audience, and also Jeff, and also Christine, who is partner at Sembrar, who is going to be helping to moderate the questions offline. Christine, you have some info for our guest, and we'll get started here with Jeff. So want to introduce our guest, Jeff Ward, who is the founder of Coder Kids and also of Kodai, what he is currently working on. In addition, he is a full-time product manager. Pretty amazing that he can handle so much, but that is what makes Jeff so unique, and what has really made me admire Jeff's work is he is able to bootstrap so much. Jeff early on decided to bootstrap his companies, and so we're going to learn about how Jeff has bootstrapped his way to a lot of success. I think it's interesting because at least many of the crowds I run around and see, and it's all about raising capital. But there are so many incredible businesses that are actually built by the founder, by just an idea. They fund it themselves and they've grown their business themselves. And so we want to talk more about how to bootstrap, particularly as a product manager and as a founder. And Jeff's a great example of that. So Jeff, I'll let you do an introduction of yourself, and then we'll jump right into more of a conversational style. I'll be asking you questions, and we'll go back and forth and just talk about how you've done.
Great, thanks, Brandon. Nice to see you all today. Hello. Yep. So my name is Jeff Ward. I guess I'll start my journey. Brandon, you might not know this, but wanted to study film back in the day, so was a bit of a filmmaker.
But you're now live.
What's that? Oh yeah, here I am on film. Technology is brilliant. Actually, when we were back in high school making movies, it was pre-YouTube, so I'm aging myself a little bit there. But so anyway, went to college, ended up studying political science, and came out of political science with this desire to change the world, and getting a little blurry there. Wanted to change the world. Went down to Houston and did Teach for America. Ended up teaching school for 6 years. Through the course of my time in Houston, ended up in the MBA, the Rice MBA program, and in the MBA program, got really hooked on this idea of, well, business in general. A desire to kind of move on from education, at least being a public school administrator or teacher. And so I was taking all these MBA classes on like acquisition and starting your own company and things, and just really had this strong goal, this really strong desire to start my own company. And so launched out on my own to do a company called Coder Kids back in 2016. And Coder Kids was a really great, I think, a great learning experience, being in the services, offering after school classes and summer camps to kids all the time. Grew that company to be pretty large in a lot of schools, in a lot of, with a lot of instructors. And then when COVID hit, I think we can all imagine that Coder Kids took a bit of a hit. We weren't really sure at the time how COVID was going to play out for Coder Kids. So immediately that day, we'd been working on this little accounting integration in the background for Coder Kids. And so like the day that they shut down the schools, I remember going to my developer and saying, hey, we're going to work on this accounting thing for a while. And so the summer for Coder Kids actually turned out to be okay. Not too bad, because a lot of people were signing up for virtual camps and things. And so we made it through that. Coder Kids is still alive and well. Eventually did sell that company off to James Thornock, who runs that company now, who was an employee of mine with Coder Kids. And now I'm just focused on Kodai, which is this accounting integration from Stripe, moving data from Stripe into QuickBooks, and all of that entails, which it might sound like a very simple process, but of course there's a lot that goes into Stripe is a huge ecosystem. And so there's a lot of different things that we have to build around. And then QuickBooks obviously has its own complexities, and accountants have their own complexities. So have been working on that. I will say being a bootstrap founder,
Mm.
the solopreneur life, or the working by myself, did get a little lonely, and I think that was one of the main drivers of me wanting to get a full-time job. So I've been working at a company called Snap Finance here in Utah for about 2.5 years. And it honestly has been a really great opportunity to learn a lot about product management, to learn a lot about corporate life, and also just to like get out of the house,
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
friends. Yeah, yeah,
Well,
uh,
that's great, Jeff. Thank you for kind of going through that. One thing that really strikes me about, we've known each other for a long time, but I've really known more about your professional life in really the past year, and what you've been doing as we've caught up. And Jeff Kodai has been a client of Sembrar's. So Jeff, what really drove you? You were going to those MBA classes. You wanted to start something on your own. This is back in, it's not, what was right, 2016 or so, that you
yep,
said you were in
yep.
those MBA classes, like at the height of let's go raise capital, but you really took a different approach. Why did you decide not to raise capital? Why did you decide to go on more of this bootstrap model?
Well, it might say something about me, and my own psyche, but I was coming out of 6 years of teaching, and I have all the respect in the world for teachers, but I don't know if that is universally held. So, at least, again, speaking personally, so coming out of those 6 years of teaching, I knew that I wanted to change. I knew that I wanted to start my own company, but I didn't. It's not like I was walking in with like the experience of like, hey, I can do this. I know that I can do this. Actually, I didn't know if I could do it.
Mhm.
I would say, you know, months and years on in Coder Kids, I still didn't know if I could do it. So it was kind of that mentality of like, at first, I think it was like, I'm going to see if I can get someone to sign up for a summer camp, right? So it was really like dipping my toes in very slowly. I think I put $300 in the bank account. We were living pretty slim back then. Ran some digital ads, and was able to get my first sign up off those digital ads. Um, and really just like doing anything I could to like find people who wanted to sign up for these summer camps. So that was honestly how I got into the bootstrap game. Um, and maybe there is a bit of imposter syndrome that people can relate to there, where it's like, I don't see myself as like a startup founder, like many of these highly confident startup founders out there. So certainly there's some pros that have come out of that. Actually, there's some benefits that have come out of it, but
Yeah.
um, you know, that's kind of how I ended up here. Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't have, like, it's a fabulous story of really proving out the value before you go in and start putting a whole bunch of time on it. Ran some ads, found some early clients, proved out the concept and such, which are great principles for any product manager, about understanding the problem idea and building a hypothesis around it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
what
Absolutely.
what was your like what? So you don't have any money, at least not a lot of money.
No. No.
So how did you start solving problems? How did you build up? Because eventually you had developers working for you. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
how did you do
So
all this?
with Coder Kids, it was almost like I think the summer camp was $300 maybe. So it was like, I put the $300 in the bank. I would run a couple ads on Facebook, and Facebook was more effective back then, right? So we'd run some Facebook ads or Google ads. I would get one sign up. They would spend $300 on the camp, and I would go and buy a laptop because the laptop was like $200, right? So it's just like, like borrowing laptops. But yeah, I mean, eventually kind of got the ball rolling a little bit, right? To the point where I could fund some more laptops. I could run some more ads. And then when the fall came, I think it was the fall or the spring of that first year, where I could finally feel confident. I was telling you, Brandon, that I started off running all of my registrations through Squarespace, and
Mhm,
that's not like a great after school program registration software, right? So
mhm.
I pretty much had to do all these like Excel transforms and pivot tables and things to like get the registration page to look the way that I wanted it. Um, and so when the spring came around and I was making, I was in a few schools, um, kind of realizing that I couldn't do this pivot table transform thing my entire career. I was like, well, I've got to figure out a better registration system. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's kind of how I got started in the dev game, because first relied on a couple friends just to like come in and like piece together a registration system, and then eventually took the plunge and hired someone off Upwork, and overseas developer, $15 an hour, and his name is David, and David's been with me for 6 years now. So, and David's been like the core of this whole project. But yeah,
Wow.
kind of just bit by bit was able to afford, well, the $15 an hour, it's not like tons of money, right? Um, and he does earn more than that now. So just in case anyone's wondering.
That's a great example of you went in there. I mean, I think for our audience that is really powerful because you had an idea, and you found a way to get around it. You used Upwork, you used minimal resources in order to get something really valuable built for your company. So how did you pinpoint what problems that you needed to work on the most? Because again, limited capital.
Yeah. Well, so for me, it was all about the time and the flexibility. Coder Kids is extremely manual, and it still is to this day an extremely manual business. So you have all these levels of, you have your students that you're teaching, but you also have their parents, you have the schools, and then you also have instructors who you're hiring to go and teach these classes. You also have equipment. So it's like all of these different levels of like keeping people happy and making sure that all of these things are running. So to scale a business like Coder Kids is extremely difficult. There's a couple out there who have done it, but not a ton. So I started building. So it was registration first. Registration was driving me crazy. But then we moved into all these other problems of like, how do we handle equipment? How do we handle HR? How do we handle all these different things, and just trying to automate those systems. Some of those things you can outsource for sure to software that's existing. Some of it I just couldn't find a good solution for, right?
Mhm.
So one of these problems that I noticed was my accounting. Like I couldn't do the accounting process from Stripe into QuickBooks, especially not coming from an accounting background. I just was able to finally figure out, I guess, like the basic processes. But I think we built this internal software or this internal process or flow so that every time a sale occurred in Stripe, it would go into QuickBooks, and that was kind of the origin of a Kodai. So just really like pinpointing this problem, which was accounting, that I hated doing, and again, just like anything that I could do during Coder Kids, like save my time, was
Yeah.
just so valuable. And so that was one of the things that we were able to solve, and that kind of was the origin of a Kodai until COVID hit, and we said, hey, let's try to launch that thing publicly and see what happens.
Yeah. So it's interesting how the idea of a Kodai actually started many years ago, like back in what
Yeah,
2017, 2000.
yeah, right. Yeah, I think I was telling you about this as well. It's like, man, it would have been awesome to have started a Kodai in like 2017, 2018, right? We never really had the time because we were always focused on like teaching the kids the classes. But I always had it in the back of my mind, like, hey, if I ever have the time, I think this would be a great public app, because I knew that there were other people facing the problem.
Yeah. Let's maybe move on to, something struck me there is that the idea for a Kodai came around in 2017. You started in 2020. You're 3 years now into it. Overnight success? Like, how long does it take to bootstrap versus raising capital and going out and doing yourself? Or is there a difference? Like sometimes I wonder, is there
Well,
really a difference? Is there a speed difference in
yeah, that's a
raising
great
capital
question.
and yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole premise of raising capital is speed,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, um, so with both Coder Kids and a Kodai, I've always been on this kind of like slow trajectory of growth, um, where it just kind of grows over time. With a Kodai, it's, I look at the charts and it's like growing 3 or 4% per month, right? Which is great. And I think there's actually some catalysts to allow it to grow faster, but it is growing, and it's growing steadily, and it's growing great. But yeah, you think about raising capital and you think, hey, if I go and hire a team of salespeople, If I could go and like improve the product to the extent that people, come on board for the product features. There's a lot of great reasons to raise capital for sure. The thing that I think has always kept me in the bootstrap game, and it's not to say that I won't ever try to raise capital in my life, because I think that there's a lot of benefits there. But the thing that's kind of kept me in the game of bootstrapping is the idea of flexibility. So I might not have the fastest growth ever, but the flexibility is great,
Yeah.
and growth is great, and seeing these things grow is great. And I've talked to startup founders who did raise a lot of capital, and they're looking at my Stripe MRR, and they're like, wow, like we would kill to have that. And they have raised capital, right? So it's like just raising capital is not like a guarantee that your business is going to grow.
Right.
So for me, I always take that approach of like looking at a 5-year timeline,
Yeah.
right? Like a 5-year timeline on an idea is probably an appropriate timeline. So as I have these new ideas that pop into my head, I'm always like, take it with a grain of salt, because that's like a 5-year commitment that might, that might not pan out. I
Choose
wish I would,
choose
yeah.
carefully.
Yeah, I wish I was one of those people that like started 20 companies, but I just like I want to like dedicate myself to something for 5 years and see if it really pans out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. How is this translated over to your your time being a product manager? You sold Coder Kids, and then most people would have just gone into starting their next company. You just said, well, like I want to actually go and I want to actually be a W-2 employee instead of you going, like, why did you decide to do that? And I think more of my specific question is how have the lessons you've learned from being a founder actually translated into then being a product manager and working in more of a corporate culture and a corporate structure?
yeah. Well, the interesting thing about corporate culture is that it has been a real adjustment, because we have at Snap, I don't know, 12 dev teams, 15 I don't know, a bunch of dev teams.
Yeah.
And I have 2 developers who work for me. So when I say this is the priority and this is what I want done, like they move quick. Like they get things done quick. But with Agile, Scrum, it's kind of like we have a 2-week timeline. Things do get done, but it's on a different cadence. And so I think that's one of the lessons that I learned quickly. It was like things don't happen at the corporate level like as quickly. And part of that is because there are so many systems that are,
Yeah.
trying to coordinate and align and make sure we don't screw anything up, make sure it goes through a proper QA process and all this. But I will say, like, from the founder to product manager piece, I think I brought a lot of value from the sense of like, I've touched everything. I've sent my own marketing emails. I've run my own ads. I, have come up with creative. I've done all these things on the marketing side, especially, even like HR. Like I know all about that stuff, right? So it's kind of funny, just to have those insights
Yeah.
into all of the different elements of the business, even though I'm not as much of a pro on all of those elements as some of the specialists that we have at the company. It's like I can hold my own and kind of have those conversations. So
Yeah.
that's been really valuable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. How do you bootstrap as a product manager in a well-funded, large company like that? What does the flavor of bootstrapping look like? It's a different than maybe being a founder, where there's a lot that rides on the line. You eating, your family eating, the success of the company. But how does it translate over to that product manager role?
Yeah, like how do I bootstrap internally
Yeah, exactly.
at the company?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that you pinpointed it earlier, right? You said doing more with less, right? And I think um, there is that mentality a lot of times in a company to say, well, we can't do this unless we get this $100,000 a year software, right? And the challenge at the corporate level is that there's a lot of there are certain parts where it's like bureaucracy, right? So um, I think there's so much that product managers probably could do if there weren't that bureaucracy, right?
hmm
Like
hmm
um, I could probably go and design some stuff in Figma, or like do a lot of wireframing. I could come up with some creative, but it's not necessarily it's not necessarily welcome all the time in the corporate environment, right?
Yeah, because
So
you're treading on someone else's ground. Oh well, yeah,
yeah, I mean, yeah,
you can whiz around Figma, but your designers might get kind of upset at you if you're doing it.
right. And they kind of like want you to focus on like your specialty,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And they focus on their specialty. Whereas in my company, I love it because I could just say, hey, if I want to go into Figma, I'm going into Figma. Like it might not look pretty, but I'm gonna do it. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So going back to a Kodai and this journey of a Kodai, like how did you decide to hire? Like maybe tell us a little bit more about this current journey with a Kodai. You're 3 years into it. When did you decide to hire your first developer on it? I'm sure you took some of the funds from Coder Kids to do that, but you've kind of carried the same mentality now into a Kodai. And how has it paid off for you? Would you do anything different? Like, what are the lessons you've learned? There's a lot
Well,
of questions
yeah.
to unpack there. So just start unpacking all of that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing I'll say is that I love SaaS. I love the margin on SaaS, right? So you're offering a service, and you're you're hoping that people will pay you for that service. You offer a lot of value. So the value that we offer, like at a Kodai, is that normally you'd be hiring a bookkeeper to come in and do these Stripe to QuickBooks transactions, which it might not, depending on the skill level of your accountant, it might not take a ton of time, or just the small business owner and their time, right? So,
Mhm.
so taking your time to learn it, how to do it. Um, so I like SaaS. I like the fact that that businesses pay us for this service. It's really fantastic. Now that said, yes, I did fund a Kodai originally with Coder Kids money, and I was hoping at the time when we very first started that I'd be able to get 220 subscribers. That was the magic number
Mhm.
to be able to fund my developer.
220. That seems very specific.
Yeah, I was like, well, it might have been 225. I forget, but it was right around there because I was like, well, that number times the number of but times my monthly average. Um, would give me the $500 a week or whatever I was paying David at the time. And so when so we started working toward that goal, and like the day that we hit that goal, I was like, wow, who knows where this is going to go? I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much in the future that. So I feel like actually having a developer, I would recommend to entrepreneurs, if you can go on Upwork or somewhere and find a developer who wants to work and kind of has the skill set that you're looking for. I think having a developer in the back of your hand is in your back pocket is kind of a really incredible tool,
Mhm.
to building out ideas, to building out prototypes. Um, I was playing with Chat GPT yesterday, and AI holds a lot of possibilities for. I actually built out this whole prototype just myself, just by chatting with Chat GPT and
Yeah.
correcting the code. So pretty incredible stuff. So maybe in the future, maybe that's not sound advice. Maybe you can just do it through Chat GPT. But
Yeah.
I highly recommend going the developer route and hiring someone if
Yeah.
you can swing it from either from your salary or from some other side business that you have.
Yeah. 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 So now, shameless plug. Why did you decide to bring on a product manager for a short amount of time? You're really bootstrapped. You're scrappy in how you work. You have a lot of great ideas. What happened there? Why did you decide to bring on a Sembrar fractional product manager?
Yeah, well, the story with Sembrar is that essentially I was working this full-time job, which I still am, and is extremely challenging to work the full-time job during the day. David starts his work at 5 p.m. my time, so it's almost like you get home from work and it's like, hey, here's your next job. So it's very challenging, and I have time for urgent things, and I have time for taking care of business, but I don't necessarily have time all the time to like take a holistic view
Yeah.
at my product. And so it was nice for Sembro to come in and kind of assist me with that high level overview.
Mhm.
We worked a lot on the onboarding flow, right? So trying to optimize the onboarding flow and trying to make sure that when people came in, they weren't so confused, that it was very clear on next steps and things.
Mhm.
So the onboarding flow is really improved. and then also talked a lot about like billing strategy for the future,
Yeah.
which is something that I'm still, still debating. Yeah.
Cool. A few questions from the audience here. I know we're trying to keep this to 30 minutes, and we'll go a little bit over with questions. JC, I hope we answered some of your questions about only why he decided to bootstrap. We asked some of those early on. Brent Schumann, you asked. Jeff, this is a question from Brent. Do you worry about intellectual property? Well, I'm assuming intellectual property rights with developers on Upwork.
Well, sure. Well, I still worry about it for sure. So, Brandon and I have talked about this actually a little bit. Just the need potentially to bring in like a fractional CTO or someone at this point in my journey to make sure that all of the systems are running smoothly without without that risk. I have a lot of risk placed in my core developer David. I have another developer as well, where it's like if he if worst case comes to David, or if he decides to leave, yeah, there's definitely some risk there. Now, I think that the one good thing is, I mean, first of all, we know each other really well, so that's been going on for quite some time. But the other thing is, I do hold a lot of the knowledge base, right? So David holds a lot of the technical knowledge, and I hold a lot of the accounting knowledge. And so I think that either one of us, without the other one, at this point, would would really struggle. But it
Yeah.
is definitely something that's on my mind, and I didn't give David like any keys to the kingdom, so to speak, for probably a solid year or two. I would actually do all of the code review and push it to the repository myself.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Brent. Thank you for that question. Feel free to leave any other questions you have since we're wrapping this up. But I'm going to ask Jeff a few other questions here as we wrap up. So two questions? What have been the challenges of bootstrapping? And if you could go back, would you change at all how you've approached both Coder Kids and a Kodai?
Yeah. So in terms of challenges of bootstrapping, I mean, I think that it's a good moment to recognize some of the privilege that I've had, because I don't come from money or anything, but my wife was essentially supporting the family during my Coder Kids time. So I mean, during that time, I was earning equal to or less than a teacher's salary. So it wasn't a great time financially for the family, but my wife was a trooper and worked through that time and allowed me to kind of float on that. And now like things are much better for the family for sure. So that's been a big challenge. And then just I alluded to it earlier, but working a full-time job, getting off of that full-time job and switching gears into a side project is extremely challenging. Maybe also helped by the fact that I have one son instead of like 5 children, right?
Yeah.
But that's challenging, and sometimes it still is challenging if I have to take care of something instead of being able to spend that family time.
Yeah.
And then in terms of going back, yeah, I think I've honed in on this topic of like build it versus buy it. There's a lot of software out there that already exists that I didn't need to build everything. The registration system, for example, like probably could have scaled much faster or much less at much less cost. The thing I loved about building it, though, I mean, I loved it because it gave me that introduction into product management, which is kind of where I am now. So I loved building it, but from a like cost savings perspective, I don't know if the value is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the main takeaways for sure.
Okay. Okay. Great. Well, Jeff, are you open to if someone wants to chat with you? How do they connect with you?
Yeah,
LinkedIn, some other place?
I don't know if my LinkedIn is great, Jeff Ward, and my company again, Akodai, ACODEI. Little throwback in the word. So can I just tell the brief story of the name of
100%.
Akodai?
Yes. Where did it come from?
So while we were working on Coder Kids, and I had no idea if this was going to work, right? So so I took the word code, and I was like, I'm going to put a letter at the beginning and the end of code, and we ended up with the Kodai. And Maybe